that, the agenda. Got through the panelists. All right, so real quick, how many freshmen are here? Wow, Pat. You go ahead of the class, or Brenda. Who got that? Who got them? Who got you? Raise your hands again. That's good. That's really good. I mean, you guys were high school seniors 3 months ago, and you're showing up here. You know, see Sydney. So, all right. How many sophomores? And juniors, and then seniors. So, you know, those of you who are seniors and juniors are probably tired of listening to me, talk about all this because it is pretty much the same. For those of you who are freshmen and sophomores, I really applaud you for being here because a lot of what the panel is going to talk about are things that you can actually affect during your time here at Villanova because you just got here. And if you're a senior, the reality is that most of what we're going to talk about you've already heard, and frankly, your resume and your work here is largely done. So it's kind of cool. What I thought I would do first is put this Venn diagram up, which we used like the last couple of years, and it's what the message of this Venn diagram is that in the upper left, how many of you want to be an investment banker? It's usually more than that, so maybe the message is coming through. And that's a good job. And Brian, it's a good job. And you should be proud to have it. But the message of this slide, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it more as I go through the presentation, that there's a lot of really good jobs inside a bank, investment bank, depending on how you want to call it, securities firm, et cetera. And so as we walk through, let's just take the upper left, the investment bank. There's basically 4 things you can do in an investment bank. You can work in sales and trading, which is where I grew up. You can work in prime brokerage, where we basically interact with hedge funds. We help them short stocks. We help them finance them. It's where they kind of create absolute returns. You can work in the research department, where you're assigned to a specific sector, whether it's maybe it could be chemicals, it could be information technology, it could be automobiles, et cetera, and there's subsectors from sectors. And the way I like to think about it is that in sales and trading, where you are selling that research, and then there's traders who trade those securities that we research. And when you think about your own skills, traders are people who think in terms of sound bites, and salesmen are people who think in terms of sentences, and research analysts think in terms of paragraphs. So if you're somebody like me who, frankly, I didn't like to write, so I became a trader. People who like to write, but maybe, whoops, this is a big mistake. Never do this. I got to make sure that's bad. It's my daughter who graduated from here in 2011. She probably wants money. Where was I? If you're someone like me who kind of I really didn't like to write, so I became a trader. If you like to write and you like to be analytical, then you look at things like research. And then capital raising, advisory and services is kind of what Brian does, and Brian will go in more detail when we give him the opportunity to talk, is where we advise companies on how to raise capital, how to do mergers and acquisitions, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty straightforward. Wealth management is an area where I think Steve comes from the wealth management side, and it's where basically securities firms, banks try to have a relationship with ultra high net worth individuals. It's a job in which you have to have a broad understanding of many products, and Steve can go in more detail than I can. But it's a job where, if you think about it, I'm probably older than all your parents. I'm the single oldest person who walks around the trading floor at Credit Suisse. And I'm 58. You guys can do the math. You know what year I graduated. So Billy Donnell, who is my partner who started this with me, is a year older than me. And he plans on working for 10 more years. I plan on working for maybe 10 more months. And so when you think about the longevity of a career, private wealth is something that I think you should give serious consideration to. Asset management, and these are slides that Credit Suisse uses, and so we don't have a robust large asset management business, but it can be anything from the things that have a CUSIP, which are stocks and bonds that are managed in a mutual fund, whether it's Fidelity, Vanguard, Capital Research, et cetera, or to things that are called alternatives, which can be private equity, it can be hedge funds, it can be different structured vehicles, et cetera. And that's an area where I think it's probably the coolest job, because it's the hardest job, because if you're a portfolio manager, you get a report card every day at 4 o'clock. And it's like water torture when you have convictions about things and your convictions are not being recognized by the market. Having said that, it is a job that if you're good at it, has enormous rewards and something that you should consider and talk to. I can see that Susquehanna's here, Vanguard's here. It'd be pretty interesting people to talk to. And then I want to spend some time on what Credit Suisse called shared services. And that's anything from legal compliance, finance, operations, IT, human resources, and what RJ does, which is the whole world of risk. So how many of you are familiar with the JP Morgan whale story? You kind of know something bad happened, right? And it cost them, how many billion? More than 5, less than 10, I don't know. 7.5, something like that. And the CEO, Jamie Dimon, has publicly said and has said to the regulators that he's going to spend $1 billion to hire 5,000 people to work in the area that would be either in this legal compliance bucket or in the risk bucket that RJ's in. So, that's an area, and RJ can tell you more about what kind of skills you need to have here to go in that world. But if you think about a world that's going to grow, that's an area that's going to grow. An area that's at least not grown and has not grown for the last 5 years is the area I come from, sales and trading, for example. So, it's legal compliance. You do not have to be a lawyer to be trained to be in legal compliance. Finance are people that typically have accounting degrees that, we have a saying at Credit Suisse, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So when I'm running the equity department, I'm very dependent on people to bring me, strategic reports that help me figure out how we're going to run the business and how we're going to think about the business. These are people that are full partners of mine in terms of helping me think about strategically where do we want to go, how we want to get there, et cetera. Operations, Todd's here. He'll give you a full rundown on that. IT, the reality is there anybody here from the School of Engineering? Okay. Just to give you an idea, inside Credit Suisse, the equity department's revenues, and this is public information, are about $5 billion. And Morgan Stanley's are about 5.2, and Goldman's are about $6 billion. Our IT budget is $900 million. So in terms of areas where we continue to invest, we will take that as we put our money where our mouth is. And so you do need certain technical skills. But having said that, there's enormous opportunities there, et cetera. Katie's here. She can talk about opportunities in human resources. That's probably, as an entry-level job, a little bit more difficult. There are jobs kind of like to be an assistant to the recruiting teams, et cetera. One of my daughters did that for a while, for example. I had one daughter graduate here in 08 and one graduate in 11. So I'm not supposed to show you this, but I did it anyways, last year, this past summer, Credit Suisse had approximately just under 300 juniors in the United States in various summer internships. And what I want to bring your attention to is that everybody comes in and says, take the bottom right, 30 people in sales and trading. Now, if you think about it logically, we probably hire at least 15 of them from core schools, which is defined as Penn and Princeton, Yale, Harvard, University of Chicago, et cetera. And so if you think that you want to work in sales and trading, and if that's what you want to do, I encourage you to go all in and do it. Just recognize that that's an area that's shrinking, and Morgan Stanley and Goldman, et cetera, are not going to be materially different. And so you're competing for basically 15 spots at the top 5 firms. Conversely, there were 46 people in IT, and we only had, take the 7 and the 12 and add them together between asset management and private wealth. Credit Suisse's private wealth division is a fraction of Morgan Stanley's and Merrill Lynch's, B of A Merrill Lynch. And so we have 400, what you guys call them, FAs. It's like these guys have 12 or 14,000. So recognize that if you take the proportion of that, there's a lot of jobs in that bucket is the message I'm trying to give you. And then if you think about being a banker, and this is a very, very hard job, and Brian will go through how difficult it is, but if we hire 136 people, which is a big number, it's the biggest number on this slide, recognize that they're the biggest snobs in the room, and so 60% of that number is going to come from those core schools, so it gives you a sense of how competitive it is. All right, so enough about that. So the interview. On the left here are what Credit Suisse considers predictors of success. And so it's not difficult for us to find smart kids. So I think the average SAT score for the people who worked at Credit Suisse this past summer was between 675 and 700. The average GPA was like between 3.4 and 3.7. Now that's a little bit different in different functions and so on and so forth. But the reality is you have to be a good student. That's the message. Then you follow that by we're looking for people who are leaders. And so all of you who are freshmen, find something on the right-hand side of this slide. So whether it's the Blue Key Society, or whether it's joining a fraternity or sorority, or whether it's getting involved in some of the philanthropy things, like Special Olympics, or what is that thing they do on spring break?
Habitat for Humanity.
The mission?
Habitat.
No, not the Habitat. But you guys go away to the what? The service break. Thank you, Whitney. Yeah. So, if you go on the service break, that's your choice. You want to go on service break. I think that's all good. Both my daughters did it. But if you go, run it. So when you come back and we ask you a question about leadership, you can say, "Hey, I went to Guatemala and we did this. And while we were in Guatemala, there were 13 people, and I was in charge, and this is how I led the group." It's kind of like the most annoying thing that anyone ever says to me is, "I'm a hard worker." Because to me, everybody, you all think you're hard workers, but a hard worker to me is somebody that had a newspaper route when they were 12 and was scooping ice cream when they were 15, and they were a caddy when they were 18, and they were working in a factory when they were 19, and they had 2 internships. That's someone who's gotten off their butt and has decided to do something. So you got to be smart. You got to have leadership. It's things that we're interested in, the predictors of success. If you play a sport, whether it's intramural or varsity or intercollegiate, be the captain. If you're in a fraternity or sorority, be the social chairman, be the president. I was the president of my fraternity when I was here. It had a lot of impact on me later in life. So take this. I think of all the slides, and Brenda will probably give you these slides. I think this is the single most important slide that you should remember, because you have to think. You're going to be asked about each of these. What are they, octa-somethings? And you're going to be asked about them, and you need to have an answer. So I'm not going to go through this, this is a pretty noisy slide, but there are 5 core competencies on here, and these are questions that come right from the Credit Suisse book. That these are sample questions that we give the recruiters to use when they're interviewing you. And so, in essence, I just gave you the answers to the test. Kind of like that, huh? All right, so best practices in interview. Katie's going to go in more detail, but I thought I'd just go through some things real quick. It's all about preparation. So how many of you have ever, whether in high school or here, prepared for a test, went and took the test, and the test was actually kind of easy? Often, right? Because you over-prepared. If you prepared and you go in, you're not stumbling and bumbling. You kind of know the answers. It's really not that difficult. So, do your research in advance, know the firm, understand the position. So, I get it. You might one day be interviewing for a sales and trading job because Goldman has got an opening there. You think that that's the avenue you're at, and the next day you're at BMO having an interview for investment banking. Don't get the two confused. Understand the position that you're interviewing for and why you think you're going to be good at it, and then know your resume. People are going to ask you questions in your resume, and you need to be able to defend every single word on there. And by defend it, I mean you need to be able to say, I was captain of the golf team, and this is why. Or I was on the service trip in Guatemala, and this is what happened while I was there. And it's always good to think like the interviewer. So make believe you're me. And if you were me, how would you be thinking about something? Take your time. We like you to pause, think, reflect, and answer. You'll be nervous. You'll be nervous. I can promise you, silence is your friend. If you're nervous, you'll start talking fast. So just take your time, practice with your roommates. It's not as hard as you think, especially if you're prepared. You know, we call it dress for success. Everyone, the older people probably heard my eggplant story, right? You know, but I was down here, I don't know, 10 years ago at homecoming or something, and I met a person who, you know, was a member of the fraternity I was at that was here, and the gentleman had, you know, really good grades, really good SATs, very presentable, et cetera. You know, and now granted, I'm meeting him at the tent where we're having a beer, you know, and nice young man. So I invite him to come up to Credit Suisse for an interview, and he shows up with like this ugly suit with an eggplant shirt. You know, when you, it's really simple. You know, wear a suit, wear a white shirt, wear a blue or a red tie. I mean, if you just think about it, like every time you see President Obama on TV, just look at what he's got on. I can promise you, it's a blue suit, it's a white or a blue shirt, it's a blue tie or a red tie. That's the answer. And for women, it's kind of wear a suit and, you know, like don't show your belly button. And like there are so many stories where people who take it too casually, and it's just, it blows your mind. Like you're all laughing because like how could that happen? It happens. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? I think that, you know, so how many people here have a iPhone or some kind of smartphone? Basically everybody, right? So if you have an interview with me and you walk out of the room and you're smart enough to ask me for your business card, what's the first thing you should do? You should take out your iPhone. You should type in my email address because I just gave it to you. I mean, it's not even 90 seconds later, and email me a thank you and tell me how you thought the interview went and why you think you deserve the job, for example. You know, I would tell you it's probably not going to help you. How do I say this the right way? It's not going to help you on a first round. It might help you on a second round. Nobody sends me handwritten notes anymore. You know, or I shouldn't say nobody, but it's pretty rare. So handwritten notes make an impression on people, and so something to think about. And even if you don't get that job, that handwritten note will allow you to build a relationship with this person that you can continue to have for many, many years. And so right from the beginning, building relationships with mentors is a really smart and important thing to do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the interview because Katie's going to do that and the panel can do that. It says questions, and then I'll just leave this here for now. We'll go, how do you go? There's a bunch of stuff in the appendix here that I think you'll find interesting that, you know, are tips, ideas, books you can read, apps you should have. So does everybody here on their iPhone have Bloomberg app? No one's hand went up? It's free. It's free. So all you got to do is go to the App Store and push Bloomberg and get the app. CNBC, yeah, it's free. Yahoo Finance, it's free. You know, Wall Street Journal, not free. And so before the internet, when I've been doing this so long, the internet didn't exist when we were doing this, we would come up here and tell you those hard copies of the Wall Street Journal that you see in Bartley, you know, what I would tell you to do is pick it up, get rid of 3 sections and read section C. Just read section C. That's all you got to read. But so whether it's the Bloomberg app, the CNBC app, you know, make sure that when you have that downtime, whenever that is, and you want to prepare yourself ultimately to be able to interview well, you know, look in those apps, pay attention to what's going on in the markets, et cetera. So what I thought we would do now is, you know, go down through the panel, maybe spend 5 minutes each, and have them talk to you about, you know, what do they do, what do they like about their job, and what skills do you need to kind of be a risk person, a private wealth person, et cetera. So RJ, do you want to start?
Sure, great. Thanks, George. Good afternoon, everyone. So my role at the Bank of Tokyo is that I am the CRO for all of our corporate and investment banking in the Americas. That basically covers Canada, the U.S., and down in the Latin America region. So probably just starting with how George outlined it, the thing I love most about my job is that any given day I walk in, I think I have an expectation of what my day is going to look like, and it's usually the complete opposite. I can be in meetings that are dealing with the crisis that we're having down in an emerging market, down in the Latin America region. I could be trying to structure a deal in the U.S., or I could be dealing with a regulatory issue up in Canada. So that could just be my morning before lunch. And to me, that's exciting because it's a wide range of topics, and it's really an enterprise-wide view. We don't focus on one particular risk. Certainly, credit is a big part of what we do at the bank, but it can cover all the different risk functions. What's interesting about it as well, and the things that I love, is that probably 15 years ago when I was at Villanova as a student, if you look at the evolution of the CRO and the risk function on Wall Street, probably about 15 years ago, the CRO didn't have a real major seat at the executive table. They were there in certain companies, but they weren't as prominent. Now, you don't start a meeting unless the CRO is actually there. So just in a quick 15 years, and of course, through then has been the technology bubble, September 11th, and of course, the most recent financial crisis. So, and to George's point, as you read the headlines, everywhere you go, you're reading about risk management. It's in the headlines every single day. We know you guys get the Wall Street Journal, so I'm sure you're seeing it. So it's really impressive that the way the CRO and the way the risk function has risen. And I do think it's only beginning. I think it's going to continue to rise as we move forward. It's certainly a new day on Wall Street, so it's not the same as it was 10, 15 years ago. So the risk function is certainly something where a lot of opportunity, a lot of growth, and a lot of capability. So some of the skill sets that you would need to be in the risk function. Certainly to be analytical. To have some technical skills is always very helpful. But I would say that you have to be able to follow the markets. You have to be able to understand the products. You have to be able to understand the customers. And the way I kind of refer to it is really as connecting the dots between all of them. Being able to see what's happening in the market, certain products, and understand what it means to the risk profile that you have at the bank. Probably two skill sets that I always look for that are probably not the most common and related to the risk function. The first one is to be a really good communicator. We often kind of box risk into the corner and think that they're a bunch of people running models and sitting in some dark rooms cranking out things for 15 hours a day. But the most important thing is not to be able to actually run the model, but to be able to interpret it, to be able to be transparent about it, to be able to tell the business and support the business and what it actually means, and why we're setting up certain guidelines, or why we want to maybe not do a certain type of strategy or a deal. So being able to communicate is imperative in the role, and it's something that probably gets lost on many different risk functions. The second thing that I would say that's probably not most associated is to be creative. I don't think creativity is something that you would commonly refer to with risk, but it's something that I preach to my people. So I have a simple philosophy, is that we don't say no, we say how. So if I have a business line that brings me a deal and it's got a little hair on it and it looks like something that could go sideways, we sit down and we talk about how can we restructure this in a way that makes sense. How can we ask for a different set of collateral? What are our hedging opportunities in the market? So we try to be creative, and we try to support the business, because we are, another mantra that I have is that we're advocates, not adversaries. So we all succeed together, or we all fail together. So the risk function to me is very tied to the business. So having that creativity, having the ability to communicate is really very important. The last couple of things that I'll say is that we look at, and it's a common theme that I always like to talk about, is just the risk and return. It's a very simple concept. Everything you guys do in your lives, believe it or not, if you really think about it, it boils down to what is the return I'm getting for the risk that I'm taking. That is something that we preach. It's how we begin to set up a risk appetite framework. I work very closely with the finance, the CFO for our corporate investment bank, and we help set up guidelines, targets, to make sure that the profits we're taking and the revenues that we're taking are commensurate with the risk that we're taking. So I can't tell you how many times we've had somebody come into my office and say, I was number 2 on the sales and trading desk, and I made $15 million in this past year. And to me, that sounds great as a high-level revenue number, but I don't know if you were taking on the most risk on the desk and therefore putting the bank at risk and still only managed 15 million when you really could have made 30. Or I don't know if you were being really conservative and you could have made a lot more, but you didn't go for it. And it's not all about just trying to be conservative. It's about trying to strike that right balance of getting risk and return. And that's the kind of things that I try to set for our businesses and work very closely with our business partners. So more than happy to talk about all those in more detail at the reception afterwards. So thank you very much.
Thanks, RJ.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve, obviously. I'm a wealth management advisor with Merrill Lynch in Rockefeller Center. Today I just want to focus on a few things, a brief description of what I do, some of the skill sets that we look for, as well as some of the long-term benefits opportunities that I see in this career. I'm a trusted advisor working with high net worth individuals and families, and I assist them with developing a plan that's going to enable them to reach their financial goals. Part of a successful financial plan includes retirement planning, education planning, liability management, estate planning, philanthropy ventures, intergenerational wealth transfer. So there's a lot of different things that go into developing this successful plan. I work very closely with my clients to find out what's the most important thing to them, because that'll enable me to really drive the plan home. An example of something like this is, your parents, they might have used somebody like myself, 20 years ago in order to develop a plan to enable you to sit in this seat right now. While this job is very complex and challenging, I see the long-term benefits, rewards of it as amazing. My first director once told me, this is the steepest hill that I'm going to climb, but when I get to the top, the view is going to be amazing. Definitely not at the top yet, and I sure hope he's lying because I put in a lot of time and effort. It's very entrepreneurial. While I work at Merrill Lynch, I'm essentially running my own business within Merrill Lynch. So that allows me to do a lot of different things. I create my own schedule. I call the shots within my practice as I see fit. Another sense of independence that I really like is compensation. It's unlimited. There's no ceiling to what I do. It's a direct correlation, and not many jobs are like this, that what you put in is what you're going to get out of it. Another thing is I get to work with very interesting, unique, smart people from all different backgrounds and all different industries, and these people actually, they become my friends. So I actually, when I come to work, I talk to people all day long, and I really enjoy working with them. And lastly, from a benefit and opportunity is, as George said, you could do this career forever, and it's personally rewarding. There's no better feeling to me when a client calls me up and says, Steve, I wouldn't have been able to execute this plan without you. So that's really good. Switching gears a little, some of the skill sets involved with a career in wealth management. Now, wealth management, there's a lot of different careers that you could go into. There's compliance, there's specialists, there's a lot of different areas you could focus on. And the business has evolved over the past 10 to 15 years. You have a lot of, you could be a sole practitioner working with clients. Now it's evolved into, more of a team structure. So this actually is great for you guys because it allows some opportunities now where there weren't about 10 or 15 years ago. Part of a wealth management team, it's a wealth management advisor like myself. Then typically you have a financial analyst or an investment associate. Their job is to prepare portfolios, do the due diligence, do the research. They also come up with creative investment ideas that we could show clients. And thirdly, there's a client service associate. This person's role is they're the day-to-day operations. They're the ones that allow us to continue to talk to clients without having to get bogged down with the day-to-day administration. The skill sets involved are you have to be a self-starter, you have to be motivated. There's nobody that tells me what to do when I get into the office. I have to figure it out. You have to be resilient and perseverance. I mean, in my career, I've been told no a lot more times than I've been told yes. You have to be outgoing. You have to be a people person. You know, I constantly am interacting with clients or prospective clients on a daily basis. You have to think like a business owner. You have to have a business mindset. There's no, you know, there's sales and marketing. You got to obtain new relationships. You got to prioritize your time, which is very important. You got to, you know, be able to generate revenue generating opportunities and problem solving skills. You know, every day I'm faced with, you know, a client asking me, you know, to solve one of their problems. And you have to be very good at solving that problem, and you have to do it because it's a service business as well in a time-effective manner. And the last one that I'd say is, this goes with any business, but it's, you know, it's ethics, morals, and you have to be trustworthy. In what I do, trust is the single most important component of a relationship. So if one of my clients does not trust me, the relationship's not going to last very long. So, you know, I'll be happy to speak about this career in more detail if anybody likes afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Rolfe. I'm a managing director at BMO Capital Markets. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, there are a lot of brand names up here. We are the investment bank of BMO Financial Group, which is the 8th largest financial institution in North America. We have assets of about $600 billion. Our market cap's about $52 billion. So we're certainly an institution of size. Our focus in the States is really on the mid-cap market. We look to do business with companies with enterprise values of $200 million to $5 billion. So we aren't necessarily, you know, tripping up against JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley or Credit Suisse very often. We do at times, but it's a mid-cap focus. The other thing about, you know, our firm that I think is interesting is, you know, we're not trying to be all things to all people. We focus on 11 specific sectors where we think we have great, you know, domain expertise, both from a coverage standpoint as well as a product standpoint. You know, one of the things that I love about my job, and I think RJ, you know, some of his comments are very relevant. You know, any given day I walk into work, I'm not exactly sure, you know, what that day will entail. I think I might have a great idea, but given, you know, global economic crises or global, you know, issues in the Middle East or in Europe, you know, tend to affect markets, equity markets, debt markets. All of that impacts our business. You know, the train ride on the way down to Villanova this afternoon, you know, a number of emails will certainly shape my day tomorrow. So that is one thing that I absolutely love about, you know, the work that I do. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I can honestly tell you that, you know, no day has ever been the same. There are good days and bad days, but you will never be bored with what you do if you came to work, you know, in an investment bank such as ours. The skill sets that you need, I think, to be successful, especially as an analyst at an institution like ours, you know, one, you need to be very, I think, analytically oriented. A lot of your work is modeling and doing research on opportunities, whether that be leveraged buyouts, if you worked in debt capital markets like me, you know, whether you're doing M&A work or whether you're working in ECM. You need to be fluent in markets. You need to understand how markets move. You need to be able to communicate both, you know, in writing as well as orally. That's very, very important because a lot of the ideas that we generate are you know, need to be communicated to clients in such terms that they understand them. And great ideas need to be sold, and, you know, having the ability to communicate, you know, very, very well is a real key to success. You know, one of the things that I said last year on this panel that I think really resonated with a number of people, especially people who came through the interviewing process with us, is, you know, what we recruit for is not for all people. It really isn't. You know, I look at analysts, our junior bankers, really all of them, you know, analysts, associates, the VPs, and I have great respect and admiration for them because they work extremely hard. 80, 90, 100 hours a week is not uncommon. You know, it's a vocation. I mean, you may think you're heading out to the Hamptons on a Friday afternoon after work, only to find out that you'll be working through the weekend to get something done on Monday. And that's the level of commitment, you know, that's the dedication that you need for a profession such as ours. It is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't mean, to sound, dramatic with that, but in fact, it really is the case. And so for any of you who are interested in investment banking at any of these firms, you really need to be passionate about it. And I thought George, in terms of the slides, did a great job in terms of identifying for you what we're all looking for, and that is excellence. It is academic excellence. It is showing leadership in almost anything that you do, the clubs that you're associated with, athletic achievements that you might have, and also demonstrating to us as a potential employer, that you really are interested in this, that you have the passion and the commitment and the dedication, through things like fixed income society, equity society, whatever you can do to demonstrate that, that this is truly something that, you are prepared to do and undertake. So, and again, I'll be happy to answer questions later on as well. Todd?
Evening, my name is Todd Sullivan, Managing Director in Operations. I specifically work in the institutional securities side of Morgan Stanley, but we have operations supporting, as George alluded to earlier. Our business is split up about 45% institutional, 40% wealth management, and about the remainder there in asset management and alternative investments. So we have a sizable wealth management business, and the operations team there is almost as large as it is supporting the institutional bank. How many people in the room here are not Villanova School of Business students? Okay, not enough. Bring your friends next year. I was a political science major. I spent most of my time in Tallentine. I took maybe, besides the con law classes, which were all taught in Bartley because Dr. Langen didn't want to walk past Bartley since he lived a half a block away. Those are the only classes I took in Bartley. For those of you who are not VSB students, you can walk by and take a copy of the Wall Street Journal as well. You should read the C section. It'll probably take a week or two of reading it before you figure out what they're talking about, but they say the same thing basically week in, week out. You'll start to pick up the patterns and trends and start understanding which phrases get repeated constantly. It is a great way to understand what's going on in the markets in what I think is written in third grade English. Is that right, in the journal?
I think
It's a little tough for a trader.
I think a fifth grade teacher could read it and understand it.
So, I mean, you guys, you'll see technical terms, you'll see jargon, you'll figure it out in context. If you don't Google it, you'll figure it out pretty quickly. It is a great way to get an idea of what's going on. Operations it's been described lots of different ways. I like to use an analogy of operations professionals wearing 3 different hats. We're accountants, we're engineers, and we're firefighters. Okay, the accountant part is, well, this is a business of finance, it's a business of money, it's a business of rules. In order to do your job in operations, you need to understand those rules, and that's mostly what accountants do, is understand and apply the rules of accountancy to the business of finance. 2, we're engineers in that we design, develop, implement systems, technology, solutions, processes to both make what we do today more efficient, cheaper, faster, better, easier to be done farther away. We solve for the new businesses, the new products, the new innovations. Okay, and then we're firefighters because, well, shit happens. Okay, and when it does, they don't turn to salespeople and traders to fix it. They turn to operations people because they actually know how every share moves around Wall Street and how the bonds move around Wall Street and how the money gets moved. And when the money doesn't move, what do we do to fix that? And when we're left exposed to somebody, how do we collateralize that? How do we mitigate the risks that RJ spends his day worrying about? Mechanically, that gets done more often than not by an operations professional. They work together with technology, they work with legal and compliance, they work with risk, they work with sales and trading, but they're problem solvers. They also do lots of routine, some could describe it as boring things, but there are lots of processes we run, but the reason that human beings are doing it and the reason we hire students from places like Villanova and other great universities to do that is because we need a human being who can apply sound judgment, good intelligence, and a brain to solve those problems. Right? If it was just to do a process, we would write a script for it and we'd have technology doing it. If that wasn't physically possible, we would not be doing it in New York or London, we'd be doing it in somewhere like in the third world. Right? The reality is we need highly educated, smart people with good judgment to apply those judgment skills to solve the problems. Right, give you the context, the order of magnitude of how many jobs are getting hired. So operations supporting the institutional business, specifically Morgan Stanley, is a 1,600-man organization. There's another 900 or so in what we call firm-wide ops, meaning settlements, cash management, bank rec utilities, and there's another 2,000 supporting the wealth management business. Okay, that is an enormous organization compared to the sales and trading organization in an equity shop like at Credit Suisse. Our budget across operations, again, for the institutional side, is about $1 billion. It is a significant organization. I personally am responsible for a team of almost 500 people located in 7 different countries, 14 different cities around the world. So it's a big organization. We get to do lots of different things. Your job won't change every week, but your job can change dramatically throughout your career. I spent the first 10 years of my career at Lehman doing about 9 different jobs in 10 years. Since coming to Morgan Stanley, I've had 2 main jobs, but they've changed dramatically. The first 10 years was running the credit derivative business, which turned into all fixed income derivatives. And if you read any, what you guys will call it history, I'll call it my career, derivatives changed a lot over the last 10 years. This year I moved and started running the security side of the business. Right? You get to do that. You get to reinvent yourself in a career like operations. You actually want to, and trust me, I want you to. If you want to do the same thing for the rest of your life, you're probably not going to be happy working for me. So the things we look for are people who want to solve new problems, who want to keep learning, who want to keep getting challenged, who want to ask questions, who want to understand how what they're doing fits into how the firm executes what it's trying to do. I view it as my job to help you make that connection, but it's your job to come with the hunger to want to learn that. So I guess there's a couple of things I had from George's comments around the process. Handwritten notes mean a lot to me. Brenda's in the room. She knows. She hears me say this every time I speak. A couple of years ago, I got embarrassed by, I think it was the interns working on Wall Street for the summer. We ran a panel like this. I made that statement. I told people, if you meet somebody tonight, write them a handwritten note. They will remember it. I've got a stack of them in my drawer at work. When people ask me for help, I look and see, have they ever written me something before? I got actually it was SBI 2 years ago. It was actually where it was bad. Sorry, Brenda. I got 1 or 2 thank you notes, and both of them were for non-Villanova students. Right? I was pretty annoyed. This year, the class was much better. I got a lot of thank you notes. I'm not suggesting you all need to do that, but if you make a connection with me and we talk about something, you ever want to call on me for help, writing me a thank you note in the next couple of days, and I get it delivered in the office, right? It goes in that pile. When you ask me for help 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, I have that stack. Right? I will find out, if you're in there, I will do whatever I can to help you. Okay? If you're not, okay, you're starting like everybody else is. Okay? It's a missed opportunity. So keep that in mind. So there are in the room, I've seen at least 2, maybe 3 of my former interns from this summer. They are here. When you come to interview for jobs like operations, find out who you're interviewing with. Find out somebody on this campus who knows them. And trust me, there are people on this campus who know the people you're going to interview with, lots of them. Go find out what it was like. Find out what the job was like. Ask those questions. Those kinds of things make a big difference when you're interviewing for a job that you actually know what the job is about, and even better if you know what the interviewer does. Know something about them, know some story, know some anecdote, know something that you can make a connection with. All of those things leave really good marks. And the last thing I'll say is thank you, okay, because you guys are all a lot smarter than I am. Okay, you've made this school a lot harder to get into than it was when I came here. You've by default then made my degree much more valuable. So thank you. And that's why we're all here. It's not just because we like you, but we're all here trying to get you guys jobs and make you successful because it makes our careers, our degrees more valuable. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name's Katie Travia. Prior to Career University, I worked on Wall Street for 12 years. 8 of those 12 years were actually in HR. So I started off in a finance program, realized pretty quickly that finance really wasn't the thing for me, and found a match made in heaven in HR. I managed analyst programs. I managed various analyst programs at Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, and most recently Morgan Stanley. And I've recruited people into research, sales and trading, technology, operations, and wealth management. I can tell you that I've rewritten thousands of resumes. I've prepped so many people for interviews. I've prepared interviewers for interviews. If you have any sort of questions about the whole process, I'm here to answer them for you. But as George went through before, so each company has a bunch of different divisions. So not just one division, one team, multiple divisions. So each of those divisions has their own recruiting team. They have their own school teams and school lists. They have their own recruiting processes. So just because you're hearing from Todd, who's at Morgan Stanley, doesn't mean that you can go up to him and say that you're interested in an investment banking job at Morgan Stanley. Same goes for if you meet a recruiter, let's say that's at Morgan Stanley, and doesn't necessarily mean that that person supports all the hiring or all the programs at Morgan Stanley. And I think that's an important thing to note because one of the greatest tools that you should use now, and especially for the freshmen, because you're here so early and it's phenomenal that you're here so early, is Nova and your Career Service Center should be your best friends in trying to find a job. So stay connected to their website, see what kind of, and similar to what you're doing right now, go to as many events as possible. Research the events, make sure you know what divisions are going, make sure you prepare beforehand so you know the actual division, so you're not going to, let's say, a wealth management event and you go and you want to ask about the sales and trading program. Because not only is that kind of a waste of time for you, but it's a waste of time for the business reps that are there. But what I would say is keep an open mind because all of these panelists have completely different career paths. And, I was a finance major at Villanova, probably should have been something more like psychology now with how I use my major. I would have never envisioned that I would have ended up in HR, with going into a formal finance program. So I started off in a finance program at Merrill Lynch. So keep an open mind. You never know, where your career is going to take you or, where networking is going to take you. So go to as many events as possible, go out, buy a jacket, buy a suit, and if you're really interested in working on Wall Street, go to those events and wear a suit. You want to make an impression, and you never know who you're going to be talking to, that you really want them to remember you, and you want them to remember you for what you're saying, not for your eggplant shirt that you're wearing underneath your suit, right? Because George remembered that from however many years ago.
And I definitely don't know his name.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that you set a good tone up front, and that means coming to events a little bit more buttoned up as well. So attend as many events as possible and make it memorable. So don't just come to the event, sign in, listen to what they say, and leave. Talk to people, go around, make an impression, and then like each one of these guys said, send a thank you card, send a thank you email. I tend to like the emails more than the handwritten notes, but obviously Todd has just proven us all wrong with the fact that
I'm just older than you.
Handwritten notes are more valuable. So attend those events, and this is why, because if you're fortunate enough to have a company that you want to work for actually interview on campus at Villanova, they're going to schedule an on-campus interview slot, and let's say they'll get to interview 12 people during that interview slot. And the way that it works, obviously, that you go into Nova, you submit your resume, and then that company and that recruiter and that school team will get the batch of resumes. And let's say they get 100 resumes, which is usually on an average, would you guys say? Would you say sometimes?
Maybe more.
Sometimes it's more. So 100 resumes for 12 interview slots. So if you were going to those company events and you were meeting people and you were making an impression, then they're going to see your resume in that pile and say, well, we met, Nancy at this event, and we're definitely going to interview her. And we met John, Karen, and Sam as well. So that's 4 interview slots out of 12 that are already taken just from people that made an impression from on campus. So that's really important. The other thing, too, is that a lot of companies now, even if they're not going and doing events at Villanova, they're doing them on site at their headquarters. So I can tell you that Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, and, well, I can say those companies because I used to work for them. They all have workshops where they'll post and say, we want to target freshmen and start to educate freshmen on all the opportunities at our company, or we want to target women and really highlight to women all the opportunities on Wall Street. So they'll have those workshops and they'll post them on their websites. Sometimes they'll market them out to different campuses, but that's their way to go out and target, a large, pool of colleges and not have to go to, not have to travel to each school. And those sessions are really great too because you get to go see the headquarters, network with people from multiple divisions, and then further, get yourself on the company's radar. And then the last thing too is just use your personal networks. So you all have parents and friends' parents that all probably work on Wall Street, and use them and tap into them early, because that's really what's going to help you get a job. Especially, let's say, if you want a job in investment banking, those jobs are highly competitive, and they're mainly going to Ivy League schools and looking at people with a 3.8 GPA that are also, doing other amazing things. So you want to make sure that you're tapping into your personal networks early on. So that's kind of my tips for before you get the interview. When you actually do get the interview, just like what George said, you want to make sure that you prepare for it. So you wouldn't go to a test unprepared. You want to make sure that you prepare as much as possible for the interview. So obviously you're going to get out your suit that you already have on hand that you use for attending all those networking events. You want to make sure that it's conservative. So I would say keep the khaki suits and the seersucker suits and the funky kind of suits. Leave those for something other than interview at Wall Street. And especially too for the girls, make it conservative. If you're going to wear a skirt or a dress, it has to be at the knee. I can't tell you how many times we've coached people, even before they come in for the summer, where their outfits are just too short, or they're wearing blue nail polish, or something that that doesn't say conservative. As much as we'd like to say that Wall Street's changing, it's still kind of a conservative industry. So make sure you look the part, and then make sure that you do your research. So set up Google alerts for the company before you go, so that, let's say, you do all your research on the company, you know who the CEO is, what the stock price is at, how many people work for the company, and you read all the taglines on their main page, but they announced their earnings 2 days before you went, and you didn't have that information on hand, and you met with an interviewer that say, well, what did you think about our earnings announcement 2 days ago? So make sure you set up those Google alerts and you're really researching the company before you go for it. And George and everybody had mentioned the fact that all of their jobs relate to market events, so you need to make sure that you know about market events and just current events in general. So what I always recommend to people is if you're too overwhelmed and you don't already keep up with the news, then try and pick 2 pieces of news information, 2 just world events and 2 financial services events, and really research and read into them and form an opinion. So that if you're sitting down in an interview and someone says to you, well, tell me what you've read about recently in the news that interests you, that you don't sit there and you say, well, I don't really have time to do that, because everybody here has time to do that, and they work 60 plus hours a week. So really make sure that even if it can be just as simple as 2 events, global events, 2 financial service events, and really form an opinion on them, so that if you're asked about it, you can speak to it intelligently. And I would say follow 2 companies as well, so that if you're asked about, if someone asks you a question like, tell me about a stock that you follow that you're really interested in, that you actually have a stock that you follow that you're really interested in, because you want to prepare, right? And then, George already gave you kind of the tools that you need with those questions. What I usually say to people is, when you're preparing for it, take each question and write out some scenarios or examples of stories that you'd share if you were asked that question. So if you were asked a question about leadership opportunities and, what is being a good leader and how are you a good leader, and, just saying, a two-sentence thing of, I'm a good leader and I have good leadership qualities, that's not going to paint for the interviewer, how you exercise your leadership qualities. So take a situation and you really want to paint the picture for the interviewer. You really want to describe what the situation is, what was your role in that situation, how did you have those qualities, so if we're using leadership, how did you have those leadership qualities, and then how did you help that situation achieve the ultimate goal. So if you were leading a service break trip, we'll go back to that previous example, you can talk about how you had strong leadership qualities in that because you led a group of 20 students who didn't know each other, so you took people from very diverse backgrounds who didn't know each other. You had a common goal of raising enough money to go and, build some houses or do something, in a different location that nobody knew about. You researched the area beforehand, you planned out the whole trip, you had a couple hiccups along the way, let's say you were driving down to South Carolina, you got a flat tire, and nobody knew what to do. This is how you exercised, your leadership qualities to troubleshoot it. So it's really just painting the picture for the interviewer and making sure that you're not just saying a 30-second response. And make sure you come with questions. So don't come with, make them personal questions. So talk to the interviewer, and at the end of the interview, they're always going to give you 5 or so minutes to ask questions. So make them personal questions. So why did you come to Merrill Lynch, and what made you decide that you wanted to be a financial advisor? And will this role be reporting to you? Have you ever managed a summer intern before? What qualities do you see in a great summer intern? So kind of make it personal, where it sounds like you actually really care about the answer that the interviewer is giving.
For that case, you can also have, it's a great opportunity to put in a plug for some of the things you've done before with the company. So if you've been to an analyst panel and they had some people down talking about their experiences, you can say, well, when I attended your analyst panel, I heard so-and-so make a comment about this. Can you tell me more about how I would be expected to operate in that environment?
Yeah.
Or what could I expect in that kind of a role, right? So remind them that you've done more than just this interview, right? I mean, you made it through the first hurdle because you got the interview, but it's a way to remind people you've been doing your homework, you've been working at this, you're putting in the effort. It's a free opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say in the same vein, it gives you an opportunity that if you're doing your homework and you're well prepared going into the interview, you're reading about the company news, so you can tie in, hey, I've seen that you just had a recent bond issuance. I see that you just made a new investment down in Santiago. How does that affect you? How is that a strategic part of the overall bank's business model? So it gives you the opportunity to show that you're actively engaged in understanding the markets, what's happening for that particular company, and then seeing how it ties back to the actual institution itself.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of it. I think the last part is on the follow-up, just make sure it's flawless. So make sure that when you're sending a thank you email, it can't, like what George said, it can't really get you the job, but it can really affect your ability to get a job as well if you have typos. If you send an email to, if you send an email to Todd and you say his name's Brian, and that happens all the time. You put the wrong company name in there, just make sure that it's flawless. Show it to a friend. Have them read it before you actually send it. And also, too, use your friends. Practice interviewing with your friends. Practice interviewing with career services. Attend mock interviews. Practice makes perfect. The more you interview and the more you practice, the more you're going to feel comfortable going into that interview, where you're going to feel like it's just a conversation and it's not going to be as intimidating. So I actually enjoy, the more that I interview, the more I do it and the more I enjoy it, I don't know if you guys would agree or not, but so that's it.
Great, thanks, Katie. So we have about 25 minutes left. We're happy to take questions. Usually a fair amount of questions. So thank you. Sure.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah. You got a nice suit.
For you, my name is Corey Otero, accounting finance level major. I'm a junior.
Yep.
And since you've been doing it for a long time, I want to ask you, when's the last time you did something for the first time?
When was the last time I did something for the first time? Work-wise or just in general?
Work.
No, you let me off the. I can tell you that when my daughter graduated in 2008, I took the family to a safari in Africa, and Victoria Falls is one of the 7 wonders of the world. And in 1900, railroads were the internet. It was like the world that was changing the world. So some guy raised money from venture capitalists to build a railroad from Cairo to Cape Town. So right in front of Victoria Falls is this big railroad bridge, and I jumped off it with a bungee cord, 110 meters. That was one and done. I think I'd answer your question in that in 28 years, the most common question I'm asked is, how did that happen? How do you stay one firm 28 years, et cetera, and to kind of, the panelists and Todd kind of talked about a little bit more, is that every time I got bored, the firm gave me something new to do, a new challenge. And so when I became a vice chairman in 2011, I gave up all the operating responsibility because I wanted to. And I've taken on a lot of human capital responsibilities. And so the things I'm doing for the first time are, we have this we call it virtual recruiting. And so we kind of actually do all the first round interviews at the non-core schools on Skype. So like, even though I've interviewed a lot, like I never interviewed anybody on Skype. I'd only used it once before, to be honest with you. It's actually not Skype, it's called WebMX and stuff. So I think the way I'd like to answer your question is that, you know, it's a good question, because you're asking me like what's new, what's different, like how's a 58-year-old person keep changing, inventing, embracing, you know, it's actually, in my personal experience, my journey, is when there's change, embrace it. And those of you who know me, I say this a lot, like when you left high school, you're happy or sad? The answer is both. You're ready to go, you know, miss your friends, you know, and I can't ask you when you leave Villanova because you haven't left yet, you know, but those of you who are seniors, in May, you're going to be really sad and you're going to be really ready to go. And careers are very similar in that, you know, you'll be given a task, you'll do it well, and if you do it really well, we're going to ask you to do something else. And then if you do that well, we're going to ask you to do something else. And think of careers as like 3, maybe 4-year cycles. I don't know if that's more information you wanted, but and if on YouTube you can see me do the bungee jump. It's really stupid. Sure, this young lady here. Yes. No.
It's a good question. You know, I started my career, you know, 2001, you know, right after September 11th. It was a firm called Bear Wagner. It was owned by Bear Stearns. I was an equity options trader there, and I did that for 3 years. You know, from there, I enjoyed trading. I learned a ton about the markets. You know, it was you know, split-second trading, and I did enjoy it, but I wanted, you know, I'm more outgoing. I wanted to be more in front of people, client-facing type role, and I always wanted to run my own business. So I couldn't come up with an idea to run my own business. So, you know, wealth management kind of intrigued me. And actually, you know, how I got there is my brother worked there. So he got me the interview. I got into the job, and I actually started as, you know, one of the roles that I mentioned was a client service associate, because, you know, wealth management is a tough industry to start in when you're very young. Because your target market is typically, you know, a little bit older, you know, the higher net worth individuals. So they look at, you know, a 21, 22, 23-year-old and they say, I'm not turning over my money to you. So I started as the service associate, it was a good job. I enjoyed it. And from there, then I worked into a training program. It's called a PMD training program. It's where you have to bring in like a certain level of assets and hit all your hurdles before you become an official, you know, wealth management advisor where you're running your own book.
I think you should take away from that, and I bet you if you asked us all the same question, that your first job's not your last job when you're 21 or 22. Meaning that, like, you know, sometimes you just have to put the puck on the ice and get in and do something to prove yourself. You're next, yep.
So not before I got into business. I did what most of you who will be successful getting onto Wall Street will do, which is turn an internship into a full-time job offer. So I interned for Lehman Brothers summer before my senior year at Villanova. At the end of that summer, I got a job offer, and I came back here, as a couple of people I know in the room, because I gave them the job offers, have done, is come back here the happiest person in the world, because you can just be fat, drunk, and stupid, keep your 3.0, and have fun at Kelly's. It's a great way to spend your senior year. So that's how I got started, but I got the internship in ways that can't be done anymore, which was called the MCI program, you know, friends and family. You know, those doors will work to get you introduced to something. It might get your resume into the process. It doesn't get you jobs anymore. So the reality is, you know, you're going to spend your junior year, you know, probably your sophomore year doing lots of research and thinking about where you want to be, trying to get an internship that sophomore to junior year, which is tough, highly competitive, not very many spots for rising juniors. But you want to know what you're going into in your junior year to get an internship at a firm, preferably at least the industry that you want to work in, so that internship can turn into a full-time job offer at the end of the summer. That's how I started. I went back and got my MBA after a couple of years of working on Wall Street. I did that part-time at NYU at night. And so, like Kay said, you're not going to get much sympathy from people like me when you talk about, not having time to do something, because I was working 60 hours a week and going to school at night, and a homeowner, and building fixing up a fixer-upper. So you find ways to do a lot more than you think you could do when you were in college in the real world. So enjoy this next couple of years, guys.
Okay. Back there.
William, I'm one of the freshmen in business school. This question for the whole panel. The town record mentioned how the compensation was a motivator for him, but for each of you, what motivates you? You all spoke about the importance of motivation being driven. What motivates you personally? What drives what gets done that you want?
Go ahead, Brian.
It's a great question. And, honestly, I think most people I've met in my career aren't really motivated by money. It really, what I spoke about earlier, it's the passion about, what you're doing. For me in particular, I love the markets. I love capital markets. And every day, I'm going to be introduced to something, that I haven't seen before, or a problem that I need to address. One of the great things about my field is, I cover healthcare and technology. Those are the sectors I cover. I can't imagine, over the last decade, what's changed more. Look at your own lives in terms of technology and healthcare. Every day it changes. So every day you're growing, every day you're learning. So, these are the things that really motivate me in terms of getting up every day. It's really the challenges of the day before me.
Anybody else? All right. I would say for me, what I love about working at Credit Suisse is I like being around a lot of really smart, competitive people who, and I know I apologize, it sounds a little arrogant, but you're around people who are in the game, and they're competitive, but you're not competitive with each other, they're just generally competitive. And the example I'd give you is that when I was a young salesman, and the thing that would help define you would be some account hated us, like somebody did something stupid, and they, we have these direct phone lines, and it was like they put black tape on the Credit Suisse one, so they're never going to answer it, and say, okay, I want that account. I want to take an account that, and I want to take it from 0 and make it into something, and using that challenge to define yourself. So I think the word Brian used is challenges. I know you've been patient, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As veterans are heading towards the street, what would you say about exposure working with them to what they can leverage starting your career?
So besides the military alumni network here, American Corporate Partners does an amazing job, has a phenomenal veterans mentoring program. I actually mentor a couple vets. Work the network, ask questions, find vets that are currently in place in the company, just like you'd find Villanovans that are currently in place in companies. Ask questions, go shadow people, and ask the vets who've done it, like, what's different, right? What is, because it's a lot. Going from military life to civilian life is different. It'll probably drive you nuts because there's lack of decision making, there's analysis paralysis. People will get stuck looking at stuff for periods of time that you would think people are going to be dying if you don't make a decision. But that's the transition to the civilian world. Find out how people have been successful applying the skills you learn in the military in the civilian life, because there are tons of them. Just your natural leadership, answering the question of what motivates me. I know the rules of this business, so I got the accountant part down. I'm a pretty good engineer, strategic planner, thinker. I like the firefighter part. I like when stuff doesn't work, right? Because people need me to fix something. I don't jump off of bridges, but I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. It's fun, right? Somebody who's served in the military, whether you served in the front lines or in support roles, you keep grace under fire, right? You learn how to do that. That's a skill in corporate America. And so learning how to apply that skill in a way and get people to understand what that is. Those are the kinds of things that I try to help mentor veterans to figure out how they apply those skills in the private sector. Thank you for your service.
I agree with that. I know J.P. Morgan, I know Credit Suisse, obviously Morgan Stanley has internal veterans networks. And so, all you need to do is find one person who's in it, and then they can go in there and open the world to you. And I'm not sure from the outside if you can get into it or not. Like Nova works, but that's But if you find 2 people at 10 firms, those 20 people will probably help you. It's kind of similar to how all of you call the Villanova alumni and try to network that way. It's just another way to network, would be my sense.
And also, too, a lot of companies actually host, similar to what I said before about networking events for students at the company headquarters. They do veterans recruiting events where they try and bring vets in and have multiple, similar to this, but just at the company. So if you look on their website, it would be under experienced hire recruiting, though it wouldn't be under analyst or campus recruiting.
Hey, Katie, you raised an interesting point earlier, which is similar to this, in that there's a lot of information on these websites, and it's probably kind of overwhelming. But again, I can only speak for the big firms because we compete against each other for talent. But every firm has an accelerated program for women. So if you're a woman and you're in this room and you're a junior, and you're a very, very good student, then you should go into the website of all of the big firms and find these accelerated programs. And and accelerated, what I mean is that we'll actually interview you sooner than we would everybody else. Normally, all the interviews are in January, but for women that are perceived to be special and going to be highly valued, there's a program. And
a lot of those events happen in December and then in April and May. So, and if you're a freshman or sophomore, make sure that you go, take the top 5 big financial companies and go to their websites, in November and in March and start to look, because they'll start to advertise those events then.
So, all right, we have time for one more question. Sure. Anybody over here? Okay, go ahead.
My name is Jimmy Vaughn. I'm a freshman BSB student at Villanova. Anybody can really answer this question. It's one thing to prepare for an interview one-on-one with somebody, but what is the best way to approach a networking opportunity like this? There's so many other students who are looking to talk to you guys.
You got to be patient. You got to be polite. I think you'll find over time. I mean, there's a lot of people here besides the 6 of us, so maybe it's easier than I think. I think the using the alumni network, and if someone says, if there's a managing director at Goldman Sachs, it's pretty binary. There's alumni who will help you, and their alumni are never going to help you. They're people who intuitively just care, and so I'm not dying to have my inbox full of all you reaching out to me, but the reality is that when we break for this, just be polite. I think that we're all Villanovans, we're all here for the right reasons and stuff, and you'll get to us. So
I'd just say that when you're in a big room like this, there's a lot of people, and you're going to be shaking a lot of hands. You're going to be meeting a lot of people that are already here. To me, people say they go to networking events, and I'm doing my networking because they're having a cocktail and talking about small talk about the Giants game last night or whatever it might be. To me, it's all about the follow-up afterwards. So you can come here and we can talk about anything that's going on in the world, all the headlines, but the follow-up afterwards is key to build that relationship, whether it's through that thank you note that was spoken about earlier, or in whatever fashion it is. If you don't follow up, then you're not really building your network, because we could shake hands and talk here tonight, and then we'll never see each other again. I mean, who knows? So you have to follow up on that. That's how you actually use a networking event to actually continue to build your network. So just don't come here and have this be the last time we speak. Do the follow-up, and that way, you'll, especially as a freshman, you'll be starting early to build that network.
And if you do get to talk to one of us tonight and you actually have a good conversation and you want to follow up, link in, make sure you have a good picture that looks like you, that looks professional in LinkedIn. You can do whatever you want in Facebook, I don't care, but in LinkedIn, well, I do care, and we'll talk about that later, but in LinkedIn, okay, it's not you with your fraternity buddies or your high school buddies, it's not you at the lake water skiing, okay, it's you in a shirt and tie. It's your professional profile, it's professional social media. Link in, drop a note in the LinkedIn, not just I want to add you to my professional network, say, what you said at the interview on Wall Street panel really resonated with me, give me the example, right? Remind me what we talked about, and so I can see your face, and that's going to help putting names with faces. It's going to help when the resume shows up on my desk, a year later because you're looking for an internship. Those are the kinds of things that are great for follow-ups. Here, you might be standing 5 deep in front of the person you want to talk to tonight. Listen to what's being asked. Listen to the answers being given. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to get the next question. Maybe you just get the benefit of hearing somebody else ask the question you wanted to ask. But you take advantage of the fact that you're going to hear lots of things from people tonight, but use some of those as opportunities to make a connection afterwards. Because the reality is most of us will not remember exactly what was said by whom tonight. And I speak probably pretty freely for all the people in the back of the room too right now. But you're going to ask questions, and then if you're the one that follows up with me and reminds me of that thing we had a good exchange about, now I'll start to remember who said what.
Okay, so just give me 1 second. I'm going to do one more thing. So how many of you had an internship last summer? All right, and how many of you used the Villanova alumni to help you in some fashion or form, or either get that internship or help you prepare for it, or et cetera? Yeah. And how many of you work out at the Davis Center? And how many of you really like beating Georgetown? Yeah. So, this is kind of a little obnoxious, but it's, it's anyway. So, those of you who've been here before have seen me do this, but this is my turn to ask you guys for something. And so everybody here is here to give back because we care about the school and because somebody did something for us in our lives. And Villanova endowment is basically a third of Georgetown and Boston colleges, which you can kind of see there. We're in the middle of this capital campaign. We've raised $350 million of the $600 million we want to raise, with the largest gift we ever received from Mr. Davis of $50 million. You can see that basically, BC is a little bit bigger. Georgetown is about the same size as us. You can see that, now these numbers are too small for me, that this is where I say leadership matters. If you were to go back even farther to the left of where it said 17% in 2009, Father Peter became the president of the school in 2007. And at that time, only 15% of the alumni donated anything to the university. So you can see Notre Dame's kind of a gold standard in the mid-40s. And then the schools that at least I want to compete against, which is BC and Georgetown, are kind of 25-ish. And we've gotten there. And we've gotten there, and that's thankfully to having proper good leadership and management from Father Peter in this campaign, and hopefully all of you. And you can see that the senior class giving in the last 5 years has kind of basically almost doubled. And so my ask of all of you is that Villanova, from our brand, way out punches our weight in terms of competing against these other schools. And at the end of the day, it's an arms race. And so if we want to have a competitive basketball team, if we want to have a top 20 business school, if we want to have a top 10 nursing school, engineering school, et cetera, it takes money. Now granted, you're all in college and you don't have any. I get that. But it's never too early to start to create the culture that, I've been doing this for 12 years. I'm a vice chairman of Credit Suisse. I could be down in Florida playing golf, but I'm here because I care about all of you, and everybody in this panel is here because they want to help you get a job. And so as you go through the next 10 years of your life, and all of you are going to be successful, if when you're 22, you can go in Manhattan, spend $50 in Brother Jimmy's, or you can maybe give $50 to Villanova. And when you're 32, we can have a different conversation. So with that, yep.
Hello everybody, my name's Joe Minaldo. I'm co-president of Equity Society. On behalf of our society, we'd like to thank all the panelists, everyone who came down to network with us, and then also the students who came to talk with all of you. Just real quickly, we have a few announcements of things we have going on later this month. First of all, Wall Street intern panel. I think it'll be like 6 or 7 current seniors who have gotten jobs on Wall Street who will, you know, help those interviewing, you know, whether juniors or seniors, kind of go through what kind of questions will be asked. Also, there's going to be mock interviews on campus, I believe in Gary. So if you want to sign up for one of those, you'll have to go on to Villanova for that. And then lastly, I believe there's a videographer, yes. So this presentation is going to be online. So if any of your friends missed this, they can go online, listen to what the panelists said, which will be really nice. And then in the back, kind of the networking part after I finish speaking, we have all these companies here. I would definitely advise all of you going, even if you're a freshman, just meeting these people, kind of starting that relationship that was talked about. This is the, you know, kind of the best way to start. And then not on the list, but is here, I believe is Kroll Bond Rating. I don't know if you could raise your hand maybe. Perfect, yes. They're not on the list. I don't think they've assigned, but they're back there, so definitely meet with them. So with that, let the networking begin.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.